Here's a question. Can I keep my child from seeing a parent who has COVID? How long should I be separated before I can file for divorce? These are all questions that we're answering today about family law from now until 5:45. Attorney Sam Viscuso joins us today to help you figure out what steps you need to take if you need to take those steps. We want to answer your questions directly. This is how you get your question to our expert today. You text that question to 336-379-5775. Remember, this is a text only, so please don't call us. This is the way to get your question answered. All right, so Sam, let's get to some of the frequently asked questions that are out there. Here's the first one. How long do couples have to be separated to file for divorce, and what constitutes separation?
So here in North Carolina, the law requires that partners be at least that are married separate for greater than a year before they qualify to file for an absolute divorce. So if you separate on December 25th, then December 26th the following year, you can go ahead and file for that divorce. Now, when you separate, at least one of the parties has to have an intent to permanently separate from the other party, and there must be a physical separation before you can actually file that with the court system.
And I know we get a lot of questions about that because for a lot of money reasons, a lot of couples, they just stay in the same house. One person's in one room, one person's in another room until they can get things sorted out. Does that count if you're still living in the same house as separation?
It does not. You need to physically separate. We recommend a new address. But no, you need to actually separate from your partner.
Okay, and do you have to show evidence of that to the court?
Typically, that's pretty easy to come by. Usually, these things don't end on great terms, so one party's pretty happy to get out as quickly as possible. But if one party wants to plead and say that, hey, we never actually separated, and they can provide documentation to the court, it would be a defense to an absolute divorce claim.
And let me ask you another question. Like, one party may say, I want you out of the house. How does that decide? And if you leave the house, does that make you give up your ability to keep the house?
To keep the house, no, not necessarily. But whether or not that's enough to start a separation period, it really depends on the factual situation. People can't separate for a whole host of reasons. Sometimes that may be related to domestic violence. Sometimes it may be some type of marital issue, money, incarceration. There's countless things. So if you're unsure about whether or not a date was actually established, I recommend actually reaching out to an attorney and speaking with them about your specific situation.
All right, let's go on to this frequently asked question. It is about child custody, and the question is, will filing a 50B give me an immediate child custody order that overrides an existing order?
So the answer to that is it depends. Typically, you can potentially pursue a temporary custody order that may override an existing Chapter 50 order that's already been established. But with a 50B, what that requires is it's domestic violence. So if there are allegations of domestic violence, a court can opt to touch the custody issue as well. But many judges, especially locally, are hesitant to do that unless the alleged domestic violence actually occurred in front of the minor child or minor children, or if they were the victims of such domestic violence. So you can potentially get some type of temporary order through a 50B action, but it would only be temporary in nature. And some judges, just depending on the circumstances, may decide, hey, we may enter an order to keep the parties apart, but we're going to leave the kids' situation as is.
Are we seeing this as a common problem during this coronavirus time?
It has been really bad, especially locally. With COVID hitting its peak last year, the courthouse is shut down. And so a lot of the domestic cases and civil cases weren't able to be heard by judges, but 50B courts were running. because of the immediate nature and need to separate people that are victims of domestic violence. So we saw a huge uptick in potential plaintiffs bringing either false allegations or maybe making a mountain out of a molehill regarding allegations in order to try to adjust the custody situation without going through what would be the proper channels. And so it did become a big problem last year with a sharp influx with 50B cases. The other issue that we had is you had partners staying at home in quarantine together that didn't usually spend that much time together, and there's a huge spike in domestic violence as a result.
I understand. Okay. We have another segment so that you are able to get more of your questions answered. Continue to send them to our text line. We will be back in just a few more minutes.